session is chaired by Anthony McKay. Before I pass the floor to the chair, let me tell you his brief biographical note. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony McKay is CEO, Centre for Strategic Education, Melbourne, Chair, Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership, and Deputy Chair of the Australian Curriculum, Assessment and Reporting Authority. Tony is Co-Director of the Global Education Leaders Program and Chair of the Innovation Unit Limited, England. He is a consultant advisor to OECD and is a member of the International Advisory Board of the Center on International Education Benchmarking, NCEE, Washington, D.C. Tony is a life member and past president of the International Congress for School Effectiveness and Improvement, and is a founding member of the Governing Council of the National College for School Leadership in England. Tony is an honorary fellow in the Graduate School of Education at the University of Melbourne, a board director of the Australian Council for Educational Research, the Asia Education Foundation, the Foundation for Young Australians, and Teach for Australia. He is Chair, Social Ventures Australia's Education Dialogue. Tony is the council member of Swinburne University, Australia. Tony's policy advice, consultancy and facilitation work focuses on education strategy for government departments, bodies and agencies, think tanks and leadership teams in Australia, Asia, Europe, North America and the Middle East. Tony, as a distinguished associate in the Institute of Educational Leadership, University of Malaya, and international advisor to the Beijing Academy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anthony McKay.
Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to the fourth keynote address at the 27th ICSEI conference. Professor Jill Jameson, University of Greenwich in London, is here with me, honoured and internationally recognised teacher, researcher, writer and administrator. Jill, I want to acknowledge the fact that your expertise, of course, covers many areas, but in particular in the area of the leadership generally, and in particular leadership in relation to new technologies, especially in post-compulsory and higher education. Jill is a powerful voice on technology and its power to reshape and redesign education. So Jill, we are very much looking forward to your keynote address this morning. Just in preliminary conversation, Jill mentioned to me yesterday that there are now more mobile phone subscribers than there are people on the face of the globe. And I therefore just want to encourage people in this room, if you would make sure, please, that you switch off either one or both of your mobile phones. That would be most appropriate. Colleagues, would you please welcome most warmly Professor Jill Jameson.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you to you. I'm most impressed at the number of people who come on a Sunday morning so early. So thank you very much. When I looked at the presentation time of Sunday morning, I was thinking, oh. But in fact, my fears have not been realised because there are an amazing number of people and it's wonderful to see you here. I really, really appreciate so much the welcome that we have had in Indonesia. It's been fabulous. And the work that ICSEI has done in terms of this conference. So thank you very much to Alma, to the President, and to the organising board for welcoming me here. Distinguished and honourable people, thank you for all that you have done in actually facilitating this fabulous conference. I have to say I've been incredibly impressed by the environment around us, by the warmth and the diligence and the beauty of all that we have shared together. It's just been a marvelous experience, I have to say. And in terms of learning from that, I thought today about shared leadership and the way in which the leadership distribution works very, very effectively when there is a high trust environment and when there is good monitoring of that and when there are good standards of that. And I thought, you know, the conference environment that we have experienced is an experience of that. And so I think that we need to recognize it. And it's come through, I think, in a range of ways which are about the warmth of colleagues and about the way in which people have actually shared their experiences together in a genuine face-to-face environment where, you know, everybody's here and it's warm and it's friendly. So, now comes my thinking, which I want to share to you today. And I want to share to you around some of the things that I think we need to be concerned about, as well as some of the things that I think we can learn together about distributed e-leadership and trust. I've called this the visibility-invisibility paradox in the ecology of online school communities, and that's such a mouthful. I'm so sorry, it's like, what is this thing? You know, because it's quite complex, and I am actually struggling in a way to understand part of this myself. So if you will just bear with me, I would like to talk through some thoughts that I had based on really, I'm afraid, getting very, very long in the tooth now in terms of more than 35 years experience of education, as Tony kindly sort of talked about. And so all of those years of teaching and researching and being a manager for many years and so on have actually led me to a range of thoughts which I would like to share with you, which relate and resonate, I hope, very much with ICSEI themes. So your themes today, in terms of the sharing of the way that learning and teaching can, for the future, sustainable school effectiveness, be improved, how we can learn from the past, how we can work together on what we have in the present, recognizing the opportunities that we have to do the best for our children in the future. And it is the focus in terms of my work here to think about young people. I've worked a lot in lifelong learning, in higher and further education, post-compulsory, but I did actually start my career as a school teacher in the classroom for 4 years, and so I've kind of been at the sharp end in terms of how difficult that is and how important it is. As one of my interviewees, a wonderful head teacher called Dr. John Guy, who's been recognised in the UK for some extraordinary work, as he said, you know, you just can't let this opportunity go with young people. He said, you know, they're here for a short time, and it's not good enough just to be good enough. He said we really, really have to try our very best to provide an authentic experience, a good learning environment, a good learning experience for young people, because if you don't get that at those ages, those very sensitive, difficult ages, then in a sense, although you can catch up, and people do, there's something very special that's been missed. And so in terms of that, I've been trying to think today about how the opportunities that we have in terms of technologies, the very, very rapid advancement, and I'll share with you some of the global statistics on that, which are very impressive, and there's lots of them on the web, and you know, you can see my paper and follow up what the references are, and also look, of course, yourself and share with me in conversation, I hope, what is happening in terms of mobile technology, because I think it is so complex. What is happening with the web, what is happening with the internet, what is happening with mobile phone usage, with social media, it is so complex, it is so enormous. There are so many references that we need together to work together to try to make sense of it and to share our knowledge together. So that is why, for this ICSEI conference, I have thought what I would do is to share with you what I've called an evolutionary metacognitive analysis. Sorry, more long words, can't help it. I'm still trying to cut down the number of words. When I was a young writer at school, for some reason, I always wrote into Dickensian sentences, and I used to spend my life doing summaries to try and actually kind of cut those down and to try and focus. And so what my thinking with you today partly is about is trying to actually get a sharp focus on what is best practice in terms of what we can learn together. So the reflections that I'm sharing with you are coming from a range of research projects that I've been involved in for quite a number of years. Excuse me. And in terms of the purpose of that sharing, as Alma introduced it, the opportunity and the need that we have for all of our young people to achieve is an aspiration in terms of equity and excellence that I think we all wish to adhere to. And it is something that I very strongly believe in. And so in terms of the purpose of what we're doing here in ICSEI and the deeper meanings that we would like to discover together, we have one time, which is now, to help these young people in our schools. And so how can that duty to young people and to the future be best realized? And obviously, I mean, kind of like everybody's flawed, and so, you know, we're going to make mistakes because we inevitably will, that's a human condition. But I think the kind of fragility and the kind of sensitivity of the environment that young people find themselves in, it's a sharp, it's a difficult environment, it's a very competitive global environment in which, in a sense, the race is on in terms of league tables, in terms of jobs, in terms of qualification, in terms of social profiling and, you know, kind of which technology are you using, how good are you with it. It's a very difficult world. And what research has recently been discovering, as I'm sure that you can probably tell me more about, is that young people are, in some cases, finding it very hard. And I know in the UK there has been really a great difficulty in terms of youth unemployment. There has also been great difficulty in terms of really what we've noticed is a kind of growth of depression, which is the underside of some of the wonderful opportunities in terms of social networking, for example. For example, with the use of Facebook, where young people are thinking, if I don't keep my page updated, 15,000 times in the next 2 days, then I'm going to be judged. If I don't have, more than 500 friends, people are going to look at my profile and actually kind of think that I'm a lesser person. This is very worrying. I mean, I know at one level it's actually quite ridiculous. And I think that people recognize that themselves, and people have actually deserted some of those platforms. But there is a kind of sense in which young people are at the edge of a very, very difficult, rapidly changing environment at the moment. How can we protect them? How can we help them? How can education enable a love of learning, which is a lifelong opportunity in transformational terms, not only for young people in terms of their character, their achievement, their sense of self, but also in terms of, the kind of qualifications that recognisably will get people well-paying jobs and so on. That is a global ambition, and that is what we aspire to in terms of every young person achieving the best that they can be. As one of my leaders that I interviewed said, and again, it's a very famous person, a person in the UK called Dame Ruth Silver, who has run Ocean College for a very long time. And she said, that's what she wanted to do with that college environment, is that she wanted for the young people who were attending there to achieve all that they could be. And so, to discuss with you the reflections and the themes that I have marked up for today, really that issue about leadership, the issues about trust and visibility have come through in a range of ways. I'm going to be discussing briefly the growth of mobile in terms of social media and the digital divide, the education response, and I'm going to be slightly kind of critical about myself as well as others in terms of how we're responding to that, and the e-leadership dimension and the data connected with that. Finally, in terms of reflections from the research, I wanted to actually enable us together to think through some important questions and to open the floor out to you and for us to learn together, for you to share with me your thoughts, your questions on what's important in terms of ICSEI's practice. Now, these reflections have come from a range of projects. Professor Alma Harris was one of those who kindly contributed to a British Journal of Educational Technology edition, a special edition on e-leadership last year. And I had drawn that concept from a project called the Elida Camel Project, which is actually a communities practice design for learning project funded by what's called GISP, or the Higher Joint Information Systems Committee, which is online and you can find it if you're interested. And the idea of actually sharing leadership together in terms of distributed knowledge around technologies was behind that. My work on trust and leadership, in a sense, has actually taken a slightly separate dimension from the learning technologies and actually has had a focus itself. And that was funded by Centre for Excellence in Leadership by ELSIS and also the Leadership Foundation. So there's a wide range of projects, including also a Community of Practice project or a CAMEL project, which I could again just point out to you as being a very interesting example funded by GISP or just Infonet on collaborative approaches to the management of e-learning. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of literature in the background that I can point you to, and this is a very brief talk, so we can only share so much today. But there is quite a lot, I think, that we can talk together about in terms of how one of the ways that we may find together through communities of practice or professional learning networks, professional learning communities, they may be called in other contexts. I mean, the COP model is a very specific model which we developed in the CAMEL project. But I think that the professional learning community, there's a great deal of similarity there. Can we together learn through that how to improve best practice? The online issue is the underlying issue, actually. One of the ways in which together I think we need to share how to improve, how to respond. How do you do the work that we do best? Face-to-face, when it's online. It is very, very difficult. And so that's one of the things that I think is a kind of question which is coming underneath this work. Finally, the ecology dimension. And in terms of living and learning systems, I wanted to draw out really in a brief e-leadership framework that I will share with you today, why I think it is so important that we actually concentrate on the ecology of living systems, people in a technology-mediated environment, whether that's online or face-to-face or both, because I think that that is one of the dimensions that we have sometimes forgotten. And I think, bearing in mind we're talking about sustainability in this conference in terms of ICSEI's work, bearing in mind the kind of global issues that we have around sustainability and ecology, I think it is very, very important to recognize that living beings are those who are being educated in schools. Our schools are living, breathing, warm communities of people, and the way that we work with each other is very important. And I'm going to bring up later in my presentation, but I'll mention it now, Confucius's words, which is, fry little fishes gently. In other words, when there is a state organization, when there is a kind of governmental leadership, the management of people, there are sensitivities which we need to respect, and the complexity of the dimensions that humans have are not necessarily understandable in an easy way. So that kind of respect for living beings, I think, is very, very important in terms of the ecology of learning systems, which is behind my work. So I just wanted to raise with you that in the BJET e-leadership edition, we called for, well, I specifically, but others as well, have called for what I called a fifth age of global educational technology research in terms of BJET's work, which is focused on e-leadership. I do not feel, colleagues, friends, partners, I do not feel that we have spent enough time thinking about leadership in relation to the use of technologies in education. I think it is a serious, critical gap. This is a human-centered environment. We have ICT, which is driving our institutions, which is really important in terms of the way that it's taking off globally. We have schools with vulnerable human beings, and I'm afraid that sometimes our approach to it has not been to take that agenda and to lead. And so what I'm calling for really is a fifth page in terms of recognition of the importance of leadership in this environment. And so, from the distinguished colleagues that we have here and their work on distributed leadership, the excellent work that has been done by Alma, by Karen, by many others in terms of distributed leadership, I think we need to bring that together. We need to learn from that work and to try to translate it. Because in a sense, we, as I said before, we only have a short time to do that, and it is quite critical. So in terms of the distributed aspect, that actually came really from Leipzig in terms of to lead people beside them in my terminology. Obviously, there's a huge amount of literature on distributed leadership from which I have learned a great deal, but I think that sense of collaboration, that sense of sharing is very important in terms of how the leadership, and I note the concept of leadership being stretched, being shared, as Jim has said, right across actions as well as people, I think is very important. As for the best leaders, the people do not know of their existence, and when the best leaders' work is done, the people say we did it ourselves. That quote has been troubling me for about 10 years. In terms of what bad means, it's sort of like scratching my head. And I thought in the end what it is it's a visibility-invisibility paradox, which is in a sense leadership I think is best achieved when you are partly in it and partly stepping back, when you are giving and handing over to others and sharing, and it is a shared repertoire between us. I was very impressed by the work of Thich Nhat Hanh in terms of applied ethics in education, and the notion, this wonderful notion, if you look at his clips on YouTube, and I'm sure that people here are much more experienced than I am in this, but it is the good leaders who will change the world, is what he's saying. Because a teacher can nourish, can heal, can build healthy, happy human beings, and can get a lot of joy in doing so meaningfully, and I think that that dimension is very important. So, briefly, and I need for Tony to keep me to time here, because I have a tendency to kind of run away in terms of where his time has gone. Global growth in mobile web is one of the trends I wanted to pick up briefly. Now, that data is just one of numerous very accurate and very interesting collections of global monitoring in terms of data traffic growth. And you'll note that the huge Asia-Pacific contribution to that in terms of 2017 and the amount simply of actual traffic that is happening in terms of mobile is very, very important. So I think that we need to recognize together the importance of the amount of activity that is happening globally around user traffic per month, for example. But, colleagues, what I want to ask with you is, what are we doing with it? Okay, this is really interesting. This is very nice. It's great to play games. It's great to do all sorts of stuff, and social networking, very important, music, great. We have a life here. We actually need to use mobiles in lots of ways, and I do too, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's so convenient. There's so much opportunity. There is so much in terms of research that can be done. But, colleagues, where is education? That was my thought. I mean, it's great to see entertainment, dining video, kind of like games, everything, search, super. But, colleagues, where is education? And in terms of that global growth in terms of mobile web, I wanted to note sorry, thank you. I just wanted to note that actually in terms of this notion, as Tony picked up before, of more mobile devices than people on Earth, 7.2 billion. And the average use first use of mobile phone being at age 13. Colleagues, I think that this is something that we need to pay attention to. And in terms of the ITU's work in 2013 of estimating that around 2.7 billion people are online, so mobile being not quite the same as online as such, but around 40% of the world's population, 31% of developing and 77% of developed world being able to access the internet. These are very impressive, and in terms of Mika's work, the massive continuing internet growth in terms of year on year. Now, the real-time statistic projects, in fact, reporting that 48% of the world's 2.8 billion people on the internet live in Asia. I think it's very interesting, very, very good, the work that is actually happening here. It is fantastic. And I want to note with you the wonderful opportunities, the explosion in knowledge that is happening, and to celebrate that, as well as saying, where is education? Where is e-leadership? And I think it's not there enough. Now, in terms of the second trend I want to point out with you, which is the social media trend in terms of celebrity culture, as I put it and as others have put it, this is very critical, actually, kind of talking about the me generation, and my daughter would be horrified, you know. And it's kind of like it's not that simple, is it? And in fact, time is acknowledging why they're going to say it's all, actually. So there's a sense there in which the social media growth in terms of social learning together is very creative, is very innovative, flexible, but I do question a proportion, and I couldn't dream to say what that is, of the pity in terms of the way that sometimes, you know, some of this is occurring. And in terms of a learning perspective, in terms of an educational research perspective, I'm asking us, colleagues, around the personalization, the branding, and the sense of entitlement, the notion of a cultural shift towards extrinsic goals in terms of materialism and away from intrinsic goals in terms of community, meaning in life, tradition, affiliation, and so on, is concerning to me. The increase in narcissism and depression amongst the young, for example, has been picked up by Twenge and other researchers. And I think that I wanted to bring to your attention what the college and school leaders had said when I went to interview them. And these were 10 outstanding leaders in the UK. So they drew attention to things like authenticity. That was Dr. John Guy, who had, at that stage when I went to see him, one of the most successful sixth forms in the UK. They drew attention to character, to integrity, and to trust. They drew attention, and in the case of Dr. David Collins, who again is somebody who's been, you know, got an award for his work in education, they drew attention to the importance of values-based leadership. And David said that when he'd been to visit educational institutions in the US, it was notable that one could distinguish those that had values-based sense of leadership together from those that had not. Ruth Silver said to me, leadership is about winning hearts. It's actually something, it's voluntary. We need to recognize this is voluntary. People do not have to follow. They may need to do the work, they may need to be managed, they may need to actually work with others, do all their stuff, that's fine, but they don't have to follow in their heart. That is our personal freedom. So in order to enable leadership, a shared repertoire in which we critique practice and in which we build a bank of trust together, a community to practice model, for example, in terms of sharing tacit knowledge, and in terms of working together around knowledge building, so that we're not just looking at espoused theories, but we're actually sharing and working together on theories in use, on trust together. Now, I'm not going to sort of spend too long on this, but there is a lot of work around, for example, skewed self-perceptions in terms of people rating their abilities above average, in terms of generational increases in agentic self-evaluations, for example, amongst American college students. That work, one might have a look in another dimension and to critique it in another way, but actually I think that there is something there around identity of young people, a fragility, a sensitivity that I want to draw to your attention.